Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining me as we spend this next hour together. You know what? I am hoping that you're safe and well because you matter. Well, we'll get right to it. This is an historical day. We've seen the Georgia Senate runoff come to a conclusion, and we see that there's been a sea change of black and blue in Georgia. But there's also another change that's going on. It's quite historical. It's unprecedented. We have never seen a president of the United States come out and tell his supporters that he questions the validity of this election and challenges the election. And the president went on to attack the media once again, claiming the media is the biggest problem in America, stating they rigged the presidential election as well as last night's election in Georgia. All of this while not really addressing the pandemic, but actually accusing the Democrats and the media of using a coronavirus pandemic to rig an election. Here's what the president said to throngs of supporters here in Washington.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore, and that's what this is all about. And to use a favorite term that all of you people really came up with, we will stop the steal.
The president of the United States still holding on to the power and abusing that power because on January 20th, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be sworn in. Joining me now to weigh in on all of this is Timothy Allen Simon. He is an attorney in California. He's the former chairman of public utilities under Republican governor, then Republican Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Timothy, good of you to join us today. How do you define what we've seen here today, the president addressing his throngs of supporters who are out there saying, stop the steal, stop the steal, stop the steal, meaning the votes?
Well, first off, let me say I was not the chairman of the California Public Utilities Commission, though I thought I was, but thank you for that. What we see happening is the continuous destructive path of one Donald John Trump. He is now turning on what he's calling weak Republicans, and he has made the entire party his own little toy box of mischievous behavior. And we're witnessing it before our very eyes in this very, unfortunately, demonic diatribe that he is giving as we speak in the nation's capital. It is tragic, but probably was expected. If you look at the character of our president, even before he became president, there's something wrong with this man. And it's tragic because one would say that he has talent. He has an extraordinary degree of magnetism with 75 million people that voted for him, 95 million Twitter followers. But his ego and his need to make everything about him is causing destruction in his path. And it's quite frankly time to shut him off and move on with Joe Robinette Biden and Kamala Harris, and what we expect to be now a Senate that will be controlled, depending on the Ossoff outcome, a Senate that will be largely controlled by Democrats.
Are you at all surprised that he blamed this election in Georgia as being rigged yet again?
No, I'm not, because he said the only way early on in the election cycle, he said that the only way that he would lose is if the election was rigged. So he hedged, basically, telling his base that we're going to win this, but if we don't, they clearly were cheating. And this has really clouded the democratic election process. It's tragic. But again, as African Americans, we know that this system was designed to disempower our voting franchise. And that is what the president and the Proud Boys and the 12 or so members of the Senate that will oppose the certification, this is what they're doing. They are trying to disempower the African-American vote in a very blatant and unapologetic fashion.
And we'll be back with more after this. And Timothy, joining us now is attorney Mark Harris, as well. He's a civil rights attorney. And Mark, I just want your assessment of what we saw. Timothy and I have been discussing it in great detail about what we saw the President of the United States do in addressing throngs of supporters and trying yet again to claim that this election was rigged. From a civil rights perspective, what does this say?
You know, at the end of the day, he's coming closer and closer, in my opinion, to really actionable behavior. It's one thing to do things unknowingly. It's another thing to do things with the intent to disrupt, destroy, bring about sedition. And I think he's coming very, very close to that in terms of his latest comments.
These comments that he's made, though, as Timothy was pointing out, have really, let me ask you this. Does it undermine our democracy when he attacks our institutions like the news media, the press, and even Democrats? I'm so tired of hearing liberals and Democrats being the evil doers of this nation, when we really do have some people, some bad actors out there who would love to attack this country.
Well, what he's done, though, and I think Timothy probably has borne this out in his earlier comments, is he's crept up on the line, but he's not crossed it in great measure. For example, one of the things that came out of the infamous phone conversation was under federal law, what it means to tamper with an election. And one of the requirements for tampering with an election is knowingly doing something. If the president can argue that for the past several months, I've been saying that this election process is miscued, that the election in November was illegal, he could argue that he did not knowingly disrupt anything, that what he was doing was consistent with his belief that, in fact, the Democrats had stolen the election. So he's very skilled at coming very close to the line, but not crossing the line. I think this is yet, as uncomfortable as it is, Kelly, another example of that.
I think both of you agree then that we do have a problem in this country, and his name is President Donald Trump. And while many people support him, this election that we could rightfully state was fair and it went through. We have to get on with the business of governing and legislating and coming together as a nation. But we have a huge task before us, Timothy and Mark. And Joe Biden's task of healing the soul of America is now even more needed.
We have to make sure that this illness, if you will, of the presidency of number 45 doesn't have lasting effects. I agree with you that one of the big evils in this country is the presidency under the hands of Donald Trump, but that's not the beginning nor the end of this. We have to make sure that his presidency doesn't affect us like COVID and be the unfortunate gift that keeps on giving after his departure. And the way we do that is to stay engaged, is to hold the elected officials accountable of either party and both parties, and for us to continue to do the things that we should do as patriotic Americans.
Timothy, final word.
Donald Trump is done. He's a lame duck president. Move on. Caesar is dead, so let it be with Caesar, to quote Shakespeare. Let's move on. Let's celebrate Stacey Abrams, the person of the year, who has begun the process of turning the red South. The South that flipped to the Republican Party under the Southern strategy of Richard Nixon, doubled down by Ronald Reagan with his engagement of the religious right or faith-based community, and held for 3 decades at least. It's now time to celebrate and to get ready for the midterms. Historically, presidents have lost a certain degree of power in the legislative branch in their first midterm elections. With the brilliance of Stacey Abrams and Black Votes Matter and other organizations that have been on the ground, hopefully now the Democratic Party sees this brilliance and its value, starts putting its economic resources, starts putting its money into these amazing strategists who can now carry this wave, this tsunami, throughout the country. As Malcolm X, who we often quote, said, everything below the Canadian border is the South. So we now have to look at flipping other states, other counties, other regions in order to bring true freedom, not just for us as African Americans, but for this entire country that we truly love. I think there's a new definition now of patriotism. Stacey Abrams is a true patriot. She's an American treasure. Let's celebrate the victory that she and those collective organizations have accomplished and move on.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you both. We're going to move on. In fact, when we return, we'll be talking about Georgia. That's next.